I'm reviewing the Miss Peregrine's Peculiar Children trilogy by Ransom Riggs. This will be spoiler free, don't worry about that. I just want to have some kind of record of what my thoughts on the series were. I'm going to start off by telling you what the books are about, and then I'll give you my overall rating and brief thoughts on it, and then I will specifically talk about my thoughts on the format of the books because they do include pictures. The books in order are Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, Hollow City, and then Library of Souls is the final book. My one sad little book back there. So the setup of this series is that our main character Jacob's grandfather has told him these really outrageous stories about people with like crazy supernatural powers and all these different events that happened to him when he was a young man, and Jacob's family just kind of brushes it off as like this grandpa is senile. Jacob uncovers his grandfather's collection of old photographs, and he sees that the people in the pictures are how his grandfather described. There's a kid that levitates and a kid that conjures fire from her hands. So Jacob kind of sets out to discover were his grandfather's stories true, and the photos lead him to this really old abandoned house where supposedly it all went down. I don't want to say too much more about it if you haven't read it, because part of the appeal to the series is really just reading that first book and discovering what that world is all about. It's a very atmospheric series as well. The setting of the first book particularly was fantastic. Overall, I would say that this is a 4-star series for me. I gave the first book 5 stars. I really loved it. I gave book number 2 3 stars. It was my least favorite of the series. And then the final book I gave 4 stars to. I liked it better than the second, but not as much as the first book, although I did think it was a really great way to end the series, and I'll get into that a little bit more in just a minute. I have a lot of friends who say that they are putting off picking up this series because they think it's going to be too creepy for them, because the photographs, especially the cover, like the first book with the floating girl on the cover, it does seem like the pictures might be kind of creepy, but the series is not in the horror genre at all. I didn't find it very creepy at all, so I wouldn't put it off because of that. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. The photographs, just looking at them on their own, it can be kind of creepy, but when you read the story along with it and learn like what's actually going on in the pictures, they really aren't that creepy at all. It's more whimsical. So like I said, the first book was my favorite, and I think part of that was the appeal of the photographs. I'll show you a close-up of how the photographs are presented in these books, but in book 1, Jacob stumbles upon a collection of photographs, and as he looks at the pictures and describe what he is seeing, then we are shown the same photo that he's looking at. However, a large part of the reason why I did not enjoy book 2, and this kind of can extend to book 3 as well, I feel like the photographs really lost their appeal because we were no longer finding pictures within the story. It was just pictures of things that Jacob was doing in his many adventures. He wasn't describing an actual photograph. He was just describing a person, and then all of a sudden there's a picture of that person. And so to me that kind of breaks with the narrative, because it's like, why is this picture here? Who stopped and took a picture in the middle of this big adventure, you know? So I didn't like the way that the photographs were integrated in books 2 and 3, because it just kind of got away from the appeal of them in the first book. And because of that, especially book 2, Hollow City, I felt like the story was really forced. I felt like a lot of plot points in book number 2 and almost 90% of the characters we met in book number 2, they are not relevant to the story at all. They don't continue into book 3. They weren't in book 1 either. It felt like Ransom just was like, I have this really cool vintage photograph and I want to put it in here, so I'm going to force my story around it. And in book 3, I feel like the story didn't feel forced around the photographs anymore, but it kind of seemed like he'd run out of the good photographs. Like they had all been used in books 1 and 2, and so we were just kind of left with a handful of photos that didn't really have anything peculiar about them at all. They were just like regular people. Like, that was really cool about book 1, is you could look at the photos and be like, was this real? Like, is that really happening? Why is that girl levitating? But in book 3, it's just like, you know, this guy in the picture just has a grumpy expression on his face. It doesn't mean he's peculiar, it's just he had a bad photo day. Those are just my thoughts on the pictures. It is really interesting to have a different kind of format like that, but book 1, it was done the best in my opinion. I will say though that I am really impressed with the way that the series ended. Like I said, I wasn't a fan of book 2, and book 3, the plot kind of started dealing with topics that I didn't personally enjoy, but it did feel very true to the characters, true to the plot. I was a little bit upset that we have so many characters in this series, and in book 3 they're pretty much all separated from Jacob, and even the character that is with him the entire time, just felt like his shadow. And I felt like a lot of the characterization of those side characters really got brushed over in book 3. I wasn't seeing them as well. That's one of the appeals to the series, is that there are some really amazing characters, and there's a lot of them, and they're really awesome, and you spend a lot of time with them in books 1 and 2, and so in book 3, seeing them not present as much was a little bit of a letdown. But plot-wise, the story did evolve in a way that I felt like was true to what the actual underlying plot of the book was always leading to, and it all resolved in a way that felt very deserved. It wasn't just like somebody snapped their fingers and, oh, your problems are suddenly magically solved and you didn't have to do anything. We actually got to see our characters work towards accomplishing the thing that they'd all been building towards, so it felt very satisfying and it felt deserved, and I really appreciated the amount of resolution we got in the final book. There was a lot of time spent on the falling action and on what happens next after this grand adventure. How do you just go back to your normal life after that? And I really appreciated that, because like I said, these characters were really the reason that was keeping me in this series, and I wanted to know their outcome as fully as I possibly could know it. And it didn't get boring at all. There was a bit of resolution, but it didn't just cut off. I really, really appreciated that. So for that reason, I really felt like Library of Souls was a strong series ender. I think that the trilogy was just really well rounded. It did have that typical slumpy book number 2, second book syndrome, but it ended on a high note. It felt like it stayed true to itself. I just miss book 1. I miss it so much. I miss that setting and I miss those characters. If you have read this series, please let me know what you thought, and if you're thinking of reading it, I hope that you'll pick it up, because it is a really good series and it is different than a lot of stuff out there. I can't compare it to any other series, like say if you like this book you might like this series, because the closest thing to come to mind is the Shatterby series, and they're just like so totally different. That's really all I have to say about the series. If you want to talk any more in depth about these books, please feel free to do so in the comment section. Spoilers are welcome down there, but since this was a spoiler-free video, please put a spoiler warning on your comment, but I'm happy to talk about spoilers with you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the comments. Bye!